Hi everyone, welcome back for this part 2. In this video we're going to focus on the ER-102. In part 1 we looked at the system as an overview in general, and we focused on the ER-101, the user interface, the workflow in editing parameters, creating tracks, step editing, splitting steps, patterns, loops. We looked at the voltage tables. We even traveled in time. Yeah, you can do that with this module, so check the beginning of part 1 if you have not seen that. That can come handy. We looked at quantizing changes and a few more things. Today we're going to look at the ER-102, or some of it, and if during this video I need to create some steps, patterns, whatever, I will do it, but I will not be explaining how it works, how you do it, because we already covered all of that in part 1. Indeed, if you are new to the ER-101 and ER-102, and you found this video because you're looking for information, you may be better off watching part 1 first, and then coming back here for part 2. If you want to watch this one first, you are welcome to do so. This is, of course, the expander module for the 102. And in terms of connections, well, of course, each module has its own power cable. So yes, you need bus power for both individual, for each individually. There is also, with the 102, an additional cable that connects the two devices together. Now, this cable is just long enough to connect the 102 next to the 101. So if for some reason you want this further away from the 101, you may have to source a different cable. But having said that, I don't see any reason why you would want the 102 away from the 101. Also, if you remember in part 1, we looked at how the editing workflow works. I mean, how the user interface is friendly in the way when you want to edit any of the parameters, those parameters always happen to be in between both your hands. So if I edit tracks, the display is clearly visible. My hands are not obstructing the parameter I want to edit. Steps, the same thing. Or even if I'm editing steps and CV for the steps, I can use both hands to do it quickly, and I'm not obstructing the view of the parameters with my hands. Now, for the workflow to remain true with the 102, it has to be placed next to the right, specifically to the right of the 101. Because if you have it to the right, you see I can select parts. We're going to talk about parts later. And I can change them here with my left hand. And the display is clearly visible. I can do the same with groups. So adding the 102, assuming, of course, you're already familiar with the 101, the way you operate these two modules, it's the same. You just install it and use it. At the end of part 1, I already went over a very brief overview of what the 102 brings to the table. And just as a flash recap, we have 4 sections. At the bottom, there is the recording section, step recording, real-time recording, and alter recording is to replace notes. Then we have the group section, which is great for creating 16 unique groups. And each group is a custom selection of steps, bits and bobs from your tracks. And you can then use the modulation matrix to link any of these groups with the modulation buses, CV and gates, and you can use CV control to alter CVA, CVB, the step duration, step length. So, for example, you can use it to mute steps and do a bunch of things. And there is non-destructive modifications. You can also use these groups to help you select steps and apply math transforms in a destructive way if that's what you want to do. Plus, you have a bunch of parameters you can set for when the gate is low, and a bunch of parameters you can set for the modulation when the gate is high. So 3 times 2 possibilities. You have 6 bunches of edits you can apply live to your selections and to parts they play and so on. Then there is the SD card section, which increases the storage space, and that's what you use to load your own voltage tables, custom scales, MIDI files, and so on. Now, this section up here called part, well, it's about parts. It's what we're going to focus on in this part 2 of the video. I don't know if we're going to have enough time in this video to cover more things, but if we don't, then there will be a part 3 covering the other sections, or one section at a time. We see, it depends how quickly I can do these things. So let's start with parts. Okay, then, what are these parts? What can we do with parts? Okay, let's go with a quick practical example. I have created a very simple pattern, so hopefully it's easy to hear and to memorize, because by memorizing the patterns, you will be able to understand, to hear what's going on between tracks. Okay, at the moment it's only one track, the others are empty, and this is pattern 1. Let me loop it. Pattern 2. Just C and B repeating. Pattern 3, it's a little bit different, rhythmically. Let's loop pattern 4. A few more notes in pattern 4 and it sounds a little bit different. Let's play the whole thing, reset it as well. And pattern 4. Okay, so we have our simple set of patterns. Let's say we were creating a song and we need the other tracks. So for simplicity, I'm going to copy this track into the other 3. Track 1 is selected, I'll copy it, go to track 2, sorry for shaking the camera, paste it, and paste it. So now we have 4 identical tracks. Now, they are identical just to keep the example simple. If I was going to create different patterns for different tracks, when I play all the tracks together, it would be harder to follow the notes, right? So right now we have, let's play it. It's the same notes, same patterns for all the 4 tracks. Okay, now let's say, before we get into the parts, that you wanted to have all the parts to loop at the 4th pattern. So you can go to pattern 4 for track 1 and loop it. Then you can go to track 2, pattern 4 and loop it. Track 3, pattern 4, loop it. And track 4, pattern 4, loop it. What's going to happen now? Play from the beginning, and when all the tracks get to pattern 4, it will loop. This is just the ER-101. We know you're not using the parts on the 102 yet. Okay, let's say that we want to do something slightly more interesting, still not using parts yet. Let's say I want to have a track 1 looping pattern 1. I want to have a track 2 looping pattern 2. I want to have track 3 looping pattern 3. And the pattern 4. Yeah, we will leave it a looping pattern 4. Track 1 will start and then loop pattern 1. Track 2 will play all the way to pattern 2 and loop pattern 2. Track 3 will start from the beginning, go all the way to pattern 3, and loop pattern 3, and the same thing, track 4 for pattern 4. So if I was going to play this, track 1 is looping the first pattern, track 2 is looping its own pattern 2, okay, so you can do these kind of things. Okay, of course we know from part 1, these tracks, they don't have to have the same number of patterns. This could be 1 pattern, this could be 43, this could have 7 patterns, and this could have 1 pattern, but that pattern is, 77 steps long. Okay, so you can do all of those things. And we've seen that even without the 102, you can have individual loops per track. But what if, okay, let's say this was my song, and let's say it was great if we had, a an instrumental Eurovision Song Contest, this was going to win really easy. Okay, excellent, fantastic track. But you want to try different arrangements. You want to add some variations while it plays. You want to do more with your patterns. For example, at the end of the sequence where they all loop in an individual loop, what if I want to play just that section and that was my chorus, just as an example? I can't right now because every time this section starts, it starts from step 1 of pattern 1, and eventually it will go to that part where they all loop in together. I don't have an easy way to say, okay, grab a pattern 1 from here, pattern 2 from here, pattern 3 from here, pattern 4 from here, and straight away play those individual patterns and loop them without starting from step 1. Of course, you can create a later section into your 4-track song, and then with loops, you can stop the section so it plays. You can do that on the fly, but it's limited what you can do while performing and selecting a track and changing the loop, selecting a track, changing the loop, and then wait that it gets there. Of course, with the 101, you have 16 memory locations, so you could create 16 chunks of your song that way, but it means you only have one track in the memory here, and you can change between what could be your intro, your chorus, and so on. So this is where the 102 comes in adding enhanced flexibility in how you play and how you arrange your patterns. Because with each of these 99 custom parts, you can have an individual start point per each track. So when I select, when I launch part 1, let's say, this track may start from pattern 3 straight away. It doesn't have to do 1, 2, 3, and then loop 3. It will start from 3. And I don't even have to have a loop. You can just carry on. Or I can say, start from pattern 3 and loop pattern 3. In the same part, I can say, you instead, start from pattern 7 and loop pattern 7. You start from pattern 10 and loop 10, 11, 12, and 13, right? The loop can be as big as you want, or as small as you want. The loop can be a step. And you start from another pattern and loop the pattern. So when I trigger this part, these tracks each going to start from where I want them to start. I don't have to go from step 1, pattern 1, make my way, the songs makes its way to those loops and then play. And I can have 99 of these different setups. So I can have 99 different ways to individually start tracks from anywhere within their own respective sequence and loop any section. So for a track, if a track had 4 patterns, 1, 2, 3, 4, I can say in part 1, this track starts from step 7 of pattern 4. That is the thing. The reset within a part for any of these tracks can be any individual step. So I don't have to even start from the beginning of a pattern. I could say you start from step 5 of this pattern and loop steps 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I'm only playing the last 4 steps of this for this track of pattern 4. Or I can say start from pattern 3, and then I can set the end loop point here and the start loop point here. So this track will never play the first pattern. We'll start from pattern 3, go to pattern 4, because of the loop, go to pattern 2 and loop 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And I can do this type of thing per each track. So you see how now it becomes very easy with 99 of these customized combination of reset point and loop points. I can easily have something like intro, verse, chorus, drop, fill 2, whatever, in a simple scenario, as in each part it's just entire patterns that constitute those sections of a song in a traditional way. But there can also be simply any custom choice of any step as a reset point of any of these tracks. So let's do an example. If you look at part 1, the display, you see there is a dot next to number 1. But if I scroll to select other parts, there is no dot. The dot in the part display tells you which part is currently active. Now, because I had part 1 focused, part 1 active, while I was setting up those loops on pattern 4, for my normal song, let's say, now those loops are stored as data, they are part of part 1, but I don't want them. I want part 1, just for this example, to be my normal song without reset points, without loops. So I can do this for any part. If I want to clear any data in a part, I select the part I want to clear, and I press delete. That's it. Now there are no more loops. And indeed, if we play, this is our normal song so far. Okay. See, it's just playing 1 2 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, and so on. Now, let's create a new part. We will talk about transitions in a second. I have it at the moment set to user, so I can select any part and activate it just when I press the button. We will see how you can get parts to kick in shortly. Okay, so this is part 2 and it's empty. And how do I know it's empty? There is a voltage display here. This display will give me some hint, some information about, in this part or any other part, which track has a reset point, which track has a loop, start loop point and an end loop point. And for this part 2, we're going to do what we had before. We go to track 1, and I want track 1 to loop pattern 4. But I also want track 1 to actually start from step 1 of pattern 4. And that's when I press the reset 2. So what I did, I set a reset 2 for track 1 on the first step of pattern 4. And if I scroll the steps, you see this LED comes on to tell me which step has the reset point. When I stumble on step 1, this lights up. Not only this, but if I focus on the part again, you see this voltage display? These 3 lines, there will be 3 lines per track. The top line tells me there is a reset point. Indeed, if I was to delete the reset point and go back to part 2, the top line, it's not there anymore. So now add the reset point, and now we have it. See, it's on step 1. Okay, now let's go to track 2. Okay, this is a quick example. Go to pattern 4, we loop it, and we set also a reset at the beginning of pattern 4. Then we go to track 3, pattern 4, loop and start from pattern 4, pattern 4, and loop and reset. And now if I focus on 2, this is telling me that there is a reset, start loop, and loop point on each of these tracks. You don't have to have all 3 things on all the tracks, of course. That's up to you, it's depending on what you're doing. And let's create another part. Let's go there. And in this part, I'm going to have each track 1 looping just the first pattern and starting from there. I'm going to have track 2 start from the beginning of pattern 3, and no special loop. We'll just play pattern 3, then 4, then 1 and 2, and then I'm going to have a track 3 to start and loop pattern 3, and I'm going to have track 4 to start from step 1 of pattern 3, and let's go to pattern 4, start from step 1 of pattern 4, and I want to loop from step 1 to step 4. I don't want to play the whole pattern because this actually has 8 steps. And see what happens. I don't know what this is going to sound like, it's just an example. And then if we focus on this pattern, we can see track 1 has reset, start, and end loop point. Track 2, we only set a start point, which was at the beginning of pattern 3. And the other 2 tracks have all 3 point sets. Oh, and one more thing. Let's select any track. Let's say track 3, just for this example. When you have the part focused, and you want to know, for example, for track 3, or you quickly want to know which one is the reset point, which one is the start and then loop point. If you hold the part for that displayed track, sorry for shaking the camera, I can quickly browse the key steps in the track. So it's showing me the first step in the track, just where the track starts from. Then it jumps to the reset to, so I can see where the track starts, but where is my reset point? It's here, it's the first step of pattern 3. And then scrolling again, it will show me the start loop point. It just, in this case, the start loop point and the reset loop points, they happen to be the same. Then it jumps to the end loop point, and then it jumps to the end of the actual track. So if I want a quick overview of the key steps for any track, I can quickly see the beginning of the track, the reset to point, the start loop point, the end loop point, and the end of the track. And you can do this for any track. Start of the track, start of the track, reset, loop, and the loop, end of the track. Okay. And now, before we let it play, just a mention about the transition. You have 3 options: user, first, and last. If it's set to user, I can select any part I want and activate it. It becomes the current part. If I set it on first or last, what first and last refers to, it's the first or the last track to complete a loop. So in the first position, let's say I want to go to part 1, and I press this blue button, this will be flashing, and the index shows me which part is pending, which part is about to happen, because I could actually scroll this away while go and look at something else while the part is waiting to kick in. So we set on first. The sequencer is going to make sure that this new part will start as soon as any of these tracks completes its own loop. So whichever track completes the loop first will be the trigger to get the new part to play. Which means if some other tracks had a loop further down the sequence, they're not going to reach it, because this has finished first, boom, the next part kicks in. So you time it to the end of the first loop of any of these tracks. Last, it's the opposite. You may have this one with a shorter loop that happens quicker, this has a very long loop or whatever. The sequencer, in the last position, will make sure that the next pattern only kicks in when all the tracks, each track has completed the loop at least once. So the last track to complete this loop, and finish it, will be the trigger for the new part to kick in. Okay, let's set it to first. Let's set it to user first, okay? And then we set it to first. So in this case, when I press this, it will be pending. But as long as any of these tracks finish the loop, the new part will kick in. And now we're going to play. And we know that part 1, it's my default song. It has got no special reset or loop points. Part 2, each track has its own. I think they all they're all looping the fourth pattern. And part 3, we got some custom loop. Okay, so let's go back to 1 and let's play it. Pattern 4, back to 1. So this is the song playing 1, 2, 3, 4, and it keeps cycling. Now let's say I want to jump to part 3. I press it, it's waiting for the track to finish its loop, and now it's the current part. You see? I wanted to play this section, and I can go there straight away. Then let's say after a little while I want to go to the second part where they're all looping pattern 4. You remember, we can look at track 2, because in part 3, which is playing now, track 2 was looping, starting and playing all the patterns. It doesn't really have a loop, you see? So now that we change to part 2, you will see that all the tracks, including track 2, will jump to loop its own pattern 4. So we trigger it and then it will start. they already played the loops. Then I want to go to my first part, which has got no loops, nothing. Then I want to go to this one. Oh, and there are a couple more things about editing parts. You can easily create new parts by copying the settings for one of your parts and pasting it into another part or an empty part. So for example, let's say I want to create part 4, which is very similar to part 3. Maybe we only want to change some parameters for one of the tracks. So I can easily, instead of starting from scratch, I can copy part 3, move to part 4, and insert it. As simple as that. And then I could go, for example, to track 2 and look for the reset point, which is here, and I could remove it. And it doesn't have to be the part with the dot. The part with the dot is the part that would play. But when the sequencer is playing, I can do all the editings I want in the parts. So part 1 is playing, and I could be editing things on part 3 or on part 4, doesn't matter which one you edit. And if I want to hear what I'm doing with my edits, let's say we have part 4 playing, which has nothing set up for track 2. The other tracks are looping. With the part playing, I can set up something for this part. For example, I could set a loop on the first pattern, and now pattern 2. Track 2 is repeating pattern 1. Or I could even tell it to repeat a different pattern. And that has changed. Another little thing worth showing is, let's say you have a part, like this one. Okay, it's just looping. Tracks apart. Track 2 is just cycling through the patterns. Okay, let's say that you want this part, which, as we know, it was similar to part 3. You want this next part not to play one of the voices. Let's take away the bass sound, which is track 3. So what you can do, you can go into track 3, and if you have a step that has a 0 gate, which means a step that is not triggering any sound, you can reset that track to that step and loop that step. Okay? So now we have part 4, which is just as part 3, but track 3 won't be playing. So this is the part that is currently playing, and I'm going to switch to part 4. See? You cannot hear the bass sound anymore. It's as simple as that. Oh, and by the way, it's really easy to create a step with a 0 gate. Indeed, what I had, if I go into the steps, originally, step 1 on track 3 was 8 in duration, like the rest of the steps, and had a gate. What I did split the first step into 2, which gave me 2 steps, each with a duration of 4. 4 plus 4 equal to the original duration of the step, which was 8. And then I extended the first step duration to 6, and the newly created step only to 2, and I set this to 0 gate. So I didn't actually have a 0 gate step before, but it took me 2 seconds to create one, and then a few seconds to set the new loop. As simple as that. How we do this, how we split the steps and so on, remember, all of that is in part 1 of these videos. And this is when you want to create your parts with predefined tracks that are muted or not. But that's when you're building your parts. We have not talked about groups yet, because if you need to mute chunks of steps, sections on the fly, that's where the groups come handy, because you can group specific selections of your work going on here and use modifiers to, for example, set to 0 all the gates, and you can, so of the steps you want to mute, and mute them on the fly, or extend them on the fly, and even go from mute to on to legato by extending the gate to much longer gates. But yeah, this is for another video. Okay, so far we looked at creating the parts, editing parts, and managing these parts manually. Select next part or any part and activate it and so on. We looked at the transition. What we didn't look at yet is using control voltage to select parts and gates to activate them. Now this opens a few options for you. You could use any control voltage slider or knob to select parts from 0 to 98, 99, whatever, and use a gate signal to activate the part. And we are going to look at that in a few minutes. But remember, we are in the world of modular. And the same way as you could modulate modulators, you can also sequence sequencers, right? So you could use an external sequencer that has a few patterns for you to play with, and you could run that sequencer in sync, in parallel with this, and one track from this external sequencer, whenever you need to, it's going to have a CV that sends a selection message to this input, and the gate to activate it whenever it is that you want to activate it. So you can use an external sequencer to sequence these changes of parts. And on this external sequencer, you can have different saves, different projects saved. So you could save different tracks or whatever. So you could have different versions of this remix of parts and so on. Now, we are not going to look at using an external sequencer to sequence this, because that's pretty straightforward. You just have a sequencer on the tracks of the sequencer whenever you need to send a CV voltage and send a gate signal. That's pretty simple. What we are going to look at instead is something I think more interesting. Let's say this is the only sequencer you have, and you want to sequence your sequence. Then we have 4 tracks here. So what I did for this example, I have my music only using 3 tracks. I am going to use track 4, CV and gate, to sequence the changes of patterns. So I'm going to use this sequencer to self-sequence the sequence. So I'm going to make the ER-101 self-sequence itself. Or in terms of changing parts, of course, it's a sequencer on its own for the rest of its track work. Now for this example, I'm simply going to have part 5 starting, going into part 6, going into part 7, and part 7 goes back to part 5. So I only have 5, 6, and 7, just 3 parts for a quick example. To do that, on track 4, I simply created 3 patterns, 1, 2, and 3, and at the end of each of these patterns, I am calling I'm sending a CV voltage that will select the next part. Now, CV voltage here is going to be 7, because this goes from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need to send 7 to get 6. So towards the end of this pattern, 6 will be selected here, and also the gate sent, so that part 6 will be pending and then activate depending on the transition user first or last. I have set it on first for now. Then the second pattern, towards the end, will be calling voltage selection 8 to trigger, to select part 7, 0 to 7, send 8, and eventually the gate to actually activate it. In part 7, I want to go back to 5, so towards the end of pattern 3, I will be sending a selection voltage 6, which we'll call 5, 0 to 5, 6, and a gate to activate it. And of course, to to achieve this to work properly, what you need to do is, for part 5, I had it to start from pattern 1. So pattern 1 starts with part 5, and towards the end of pattern 1, we'll switch this to part 6. Part 6, the reset to, is on pattern 2, because I need this part to have its own CV and gate signal, which is different from the previous part. If it was identical, you can use the same pattern as before, but because I need a different signal, so I need a different pattern. And the same, part 7, reset to pattern 3, which towards the end has the CV voltage to go back to 5. So the parts are these. This is not just manual changing, so you can hear what the parts sound like. Change it. And then it will go back to 5, okay? So let's see if it works. Yeah, it will work. I mean, it's straightforward. CV, voltage here, gates going here. Now, 6 appeared because I have a pattern 1 already ready, to select part 6, but it will only be activated towards the end indeed. I will leave the display here to show, to update with track 4, so you can see how when this gets towards step 14, 15, whatever, the gate will come up. I have more than one gate. I put a few, but yeah, because I couldn't be bothered to check exactly which one to use in timing here, but it was easy to put a few and then it works. So yeah, let's try. This is part 5. Pending. Part 6, which is already has 7 ready for later. Now this is part 7, and this got 5 ready for later, and now it's on 5. Okay, and now let's have a look at using external control voltage from knobs, changing values, and using a gate button to trigger them. I'm using the button on the IntelliGel planner, just as a gate, and I'm using the Mordax data to change voltage so that you can actually see, hopefully you can see it on screen. You can see how I'm changing voltage here, and it goes from 0. It goes up to whichever value. Of course, if you don't want something so fine, if you want something that moves quicker between all those numbers, a normal control knob or something like the levitate, that also works just fine. This one is a little bit more fine in the way, it needs a bigger turn, even if you can push and turn 1 octave at a time. But I'm using this so you can see the voltage value on screen. Okay, on this white section here. So, well, you've seen it. You already seen it there. Let's say I am on 8, and I will start the sequencer as it is. Then with control voltage, could have been a slider, a different module. See, I'm changing the value here to 5. Then I'm going to push the button. And they change it to 5. Then I'm going to call 7. And I'm going to push the button. And then 6, and push the button. As simple as that. I don't think you need to see any more about this. You can use any control voltage. 0 to 10 volt, is it 0 to 99 or 0 to 100 parts, whatever. Close enough, okay? All right. Okay, people, that's it for part 2 of this series on the ER-101 and ER-102. We didn't finish our review yet. We have one or more parts, and we will look at the groups section, the recording section, a couple of things about the SD card, and I hope to do that as soon as possible, but time, it's what it is. I hope you enjoyed this video. Click like if you will, that would be nice, and I would appreciate it if you can share this video, that would be excellent. Remember to subscribe so you're not going to miss out on the upcoming parts and other videos. I've got a couple of different reviews on different modules coming out really soon, hopefully. Things always take longer than expected. But anyway, yes, again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, happy Euroracking!